Would this be lecture H or
Probably. I don't remember. Let's go look.
last
Okay.
time we didn't do a lecture?
Yeah, I still think we did.
We're still going to count it as,
I
yeah. Whatever the last one we did, we're at just adding one to it. Modulus in this language cannot work on floating point numbers. In some other languages they will, which is a weird idea. 13 modulus 7.5. Okay, 7.5 went into 13 one time with a remainder of, kind of blows your mind. C++ doesn't do it. And comments. Comments are used to document the program. What does document mean? Is to describe it. If you work in a programming team, you absolutely have to put comments in your code just so your coworkers know what in the world you're trying to do. But also they're useful to yourself. If you put some code away and then you come back to it 6 months or 6 weeks later or 6 years later, it's going to be much harder to understand what you were trying to do if there's not comments. So you want to indicate the purpose of the program. This program draws a rectangle on the screen. You're going to describe the use of the variables. X and Y contain the length and the width of the rectangle, and A and B contain the starting points, something like that. To explain complex sections of code. Now, some things are so easy you don't need to really explain it. You're not going to do this. This would be silly. Cout, right, enter a value for X. And, and then go comment, ask the user for X, right. You don't need to make every line have a comment. Instead, you could block off a section, right? You could say, ask the user for the input values, or let user enter input values, or you could just put input, right? And it would probably indicate a block of code, several statements where you're COUTing and CINs, and more COUTs and CINs and whatever. And then later on, after your input, get input from user, whatever that was supposed to be, and cin, etc., and then cout something else, and then cin something else, and then later calculate, volume of tetrahedron, whatever, and then whatever the equation is, double area is equal to blah 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 blah, right? Whatever that equation is, and then output results. So cout something else, cout something else, whatever you needed to do. So you're breaking it up into sections with your comments. Then up at the top, you would put a comment as describing what it is, like your name, on the homework assignment X. And then you would describe what it's supposed to do, calculate the volume of a tetrahedron, and then you would declare your variables, right? Double X, and you might describe what X is. That's the height. And double Y is the, the edge length of edge of base. Now those are bad variable names, X and Y. Why didn't I call it height? And why didn't I call it, edge or side or something like that? Well, it's because I did this and I wasn't thinking ahead, right? And then one more for the area. Double area, contains result. Since I have that here, I would not be recreating the variable here. That would be a syntax error. Not that the rest of this is going to compile. But I've declared the variable here. If I put another variable declaration here, that would be a syntax error, so I need to remove that. So that's documenting your code with comments. Comments are completely ignored by the compiler. You can type in anything you want in them. The compiler just strips them out when it's turning it into machine language. So single line comments begin with the // not the backslash, that's the one above the enter key. This is one below the question mark. Multi-line comments, /* and then */. Like this is a multi-line comment. Right, so you can just make it as many lines as you want. Hundreds of lines if you so choose. Or you can do that. And in the 70s, that's how people did it before the invention of // right? That's how you made a single line comment, was doing this, right? But then somebody came up with a great idea of making a single line comment. And named constants. Now we're talking about what I just was talking about a minute ago. Const, double tax rate equals 0.0675. Const int num states equals 50. Typically, the recommendation is if you are going to declare a constant, make the name of it uppercase letters with underscores. That's just a convention, an agreement that programmers tend to follow. That way, if you see something in uppercase letters, even if you don't see the declaration of it, you know that it's a constant. You're supposed to not change its value. Const means that if you try to change it later, if later on in the code we try to set tax rate equal to something else, it won't even compile. And that's a good thing. Why do you want to use consts? So that you don't have to litter your code with what are called magic numbers, right? What if I've the width of the screen, and I'm going to use that in like 17 different calculations in my code. Well, if I decide that all screens are equal to 2048 pixels wide, so in all those calculations I put the number 2048, that's really lame. Because what if we get on a larger screen? Or we decide that we're going to support, a larger monitor? I would have to search and replace for all of those, or I'd have to set up, Instead, you want to store that 2048 in a variable so that you only have to change it once. And if it's supposed to be a fixed value, if our code just absolutely will not support a screen width larger than 2048, then okay, you can make it a constant. Otherwise, you might make it, a variable so that it could be changed. But if it has to stay the same throughout the entire program, once declared, then you mark it as a const. And you put it at the top of the program to make it easy to change. Later on, we allow Puerto Rico to go into the United States. All of a sudden, we're going to have 51 states. We'd have to go back and modify our header file or our CPP file and change num states to equal to 51. And hopefully, we've done that in such a way that you'd only have to make the change once, and it would work throughout the rest of the program. But if we had hard-coded, if we typed in 50 everywhere we were referring to the 50 states, that's a magic number. Now, we probably know 50, that's the number of states. But, sometimes magic numbers are a lot less obvious than that. If we see upper limit equals 37, okay, great, I know, and then if x is greater than upper limit, I kind of know what that means. X isn't supposed to get greater than 37, than that number. But if I have x equals 37, if x equals 37, if x less than 37, if x greater than 37, I have no idea what those 37s mean. But if it's a word, if something equals upper limit, then I have a much better idea of what it is. So here they're using pi, a named constant, to hold that magic number, 3.14159. And here they're storing diameter in another const. Now I wouldn't do that because it's likely that you're going to let the user type in the diameter. And if the user is going to be typing it in, it better not be marked as a const. It wouldn't compile. All right, programming style. We're going to have a whole 3 or 4 bullet points on programming style. It's that easy. All right, but we got to talk about it. That's the visual organization of the source code. In Python, things had to be indented correctly in order to work. In this language, that's not true. Let me see if I need to start Visual Studio so I can play with some of this stuff. Just going to pick one at random. I didn't even open it as a project. And by the way, if you double click on a CPP file, this is what you get. It looks like you're ready to rock and roll. But, now that more people listen to other forms of music than rock and roll, that phrase kind of makes sense. No more sense. But anyway, I want to run it. Oh, my green button looks different than usual. Oh, what in the heck is it trying to do? Well, we didn't open it as a project. You always have to open your code as a project if you're in Visual Studio. Other programs are different, so you got to open the project. If you don't have a project, you're going to have to make a new project and copy this file into it in order to get it to compile. So when you upload source.cpp or whatever you call it, if you download it on another computer and you want to actually get it to work, still talking Visual Studio, you're going to have to make a new project. That could be an argument for zipping up the entire project folder. Anyways, programming style. This is programming style. I went ahead and I used tabs to make the code obvious to read. You know, I put blank space, white space it's called. I didn't have to do that. I could remove all the, you know, if I wanted to, I can make it look like this. If this program would work just as well.
Yeah, but why would you do that?
Why would you do that? You wouldn't, unless you're crazy. There is something called the obfuscated C contest. Obfuscated C. And obfuscated C, come on, I want some answers. Winning entries. 2012. Alrighty. Alrighty, there we go. This is valid C code. C is just a precursor to C++, so it would probably compile in C++. And you go, what in the heck? Well, the purpose of the obfuscated C contest is to make code that is absolutely impossible for anybody else to read, and that they can't figure out what it's doing. Right?
Would that still work if you put that in? Would that run something?
Yeah, yeah.
Just break
If I copy and paste it into a C++ program, it ought to work because the syntax of C should be compatible with C++. And I have no idea what it's doing.
Does it say what it does, or is it
Try
just
it.
like a?
Just work your own.
Same things to find out.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I don't want to do my computer. I don't know if that's that looks satanic.
It's
I'm not-
both.
Let's see if we can. Let's see if it'll work.
Music note, I see it.
Let's see what it's going to do. I'm going to copy this into a new project.
Oh, I just flooded the Mac table. That's not good.
You can't blame these kids.
It looks different when I copied and pasted it, but that's okay. C++ was trying to clean it up as I pasted it.
Or C++.
Yeah, try. But let's see if it works. Let's see if it'll build. Yeah, the computer explodes. That's missing type specifier int assumed. Note C++ does not support default ints. Okay, so that's an error. It's turning out that there are differences between C and ++. Maybe I could fix it with that. Let's find out. But I'm not going to try to take the time to fix them all. But you get the idea. That code was impossible to follow. Now, only maniacs are going to try to make their code look like that. But you can mess your code up accidentally. And what do I mean by that? If I had something like this going on and I started copying and pasting, I decided that I wanted to take this code and then I was going to put it somewhere else, right? And I pasted it there. It may no longer match the indentation of the rest of the code. And you kind of want to keep your indentation levels right, even though it's not mandatory like it is in Python, just because it helps to read the code. And quite often you're going to get the parsing reached into file error. I forget exactly what it's called. It just means that there's not enough closing braces, or that there's too many closing braces.
What if you make a program that is like really available and like someone buys it from you and they try to like
Typically,
pay
if
you
some
as much,
typically
they
if,
get somebody else to fix it and they can't fix it, so they have to rehire you. Wouldn't that be a good idea to make it look really hard?
no, if you're selling your program, there's one of two things going on. One is you're only going to give them the executable, just like if you download a game for Android or whatever. You don't get to change the code, right? I'm just buying the game from you, and so I get an app, I get an executable. Or you're buying the source code, and we form an agreement between us. You know, if I just gave you the executable, or you just gave me the executable, I'd have to come and pay you extra money to change it. I would never even be able to see this stuff. I just have a .exe file. That makes sense? Yeah. Good question. All right, so if stuff is not indented correctly, then you can run into a situation where you have too many closing braces, like that, and then when you try to build it, you're going to get an error. Let's see what the specific error is. You probably have already hit this one. Well, it's showing all sorts of problems. Or it's not anything that I was expecting to see, but it's certainly showing problems. Or if you have not enough closing braces and you try to build it. Again, it's pretty oblique. It's pretty vague. I wish that was a clear error. I guess I'm used to looking at Java code where it explicitly calls it out. But then you got to figure out what's wrong. And so you got to try to line up all your code, you know, and so you can check your opening braces and your closing braces. And by the way, there's a trick to jumping from an opening brace to a closing brace and back if you're using Visual Studio. Let me see if I remember what it is. If I'm sitting in an open brace and I want to get to the closing brace, if I hit the Control key followed by the open brace, the closed brace, nope, it's not working. Try it once more. Yeah, it's not working. Forget it. Okay, it's supposed to jump to the matching brace. But anyways, if I haven't tabbed things well, then my braces can get off and the logic can totally break. So it's a good idea to try to get your code to be formatted pretty. Now there is this edit advanced format selection. It's supposed to try to tab it correctly if you do that, but I've never noticed it doing much good. Let's see if it does some good. I'm going to mess up my tab. Ooh, we should try that on that other piece of code we had. Anyways, like that, and now it's all lousy. I'm going to highlight everything by hitting Control A, Command A on the Mac. I'm going to come to Edit, Advanced Format Selection. And then I'm going to come up here and see if it fixed it. Well, it tried to fix it. It left this thing out here, but at least it lined up the tabs. So that can be a help. If your code is looking for confusing because you've been copying and pasting and the indents no longer match up or whatever, just highlight, or you just even go to Edit, Advanced Format Document, and see if it'll make it all nice. At least help clear it up. Alright, so your programming style, that's the organization of the source code, the use of spaces and tabs and blank lines. That doesn't affect the syntax of the program, right? If I deleted all the carriage returns, the program would still work. And it affects the readability of the source code, and your goal is to make your code readable. Unless you're Shelley and she wants to make sure nobody else can edit her code except her. Yeah, no, you're going to make your code readable, especially if you're working in a business with somebody else. They'll come and throw foam bricks at you if you make your code hard to read.
What?
Foam bricks. You gotta have foam bricks to bash each other with, or foam hammers, right? All righty. And thus ends chapter 2. Any questions? This is going to be a short lecture since the first part was not recorded. That's okay though. Let's go get PowerPoint for chapter 3 and play a whole 10 minutes. We haven't even typed in anything. I'm feeling so lame. There may not be anything to upload for this lecture, and that's okay. Now here's where we're going to start going faster, not because we want to get through more material, but because we've already covered a lot of this stuff already. So it's like I take 3 or 4 weeks, or to get through chapter 1 and 2, and then after that we start rolling pretty fast because we've already talked about this stuff. Like, what is CIN? That's standard input. It stands for console input. That's what the C means, console. Console just meaning the keyboard. Here, to get it to work, you have to do # include IOStream. What does it do? It reads from the keyboard. And then when you want data out of it, you use greater than. It has to be greater than the symbols and the directions of those angles mean something. They dictate whether you're sending the data to the screen or in from the keyboard. This stuff is going out to the screen, so we use the arrows to point towards the out. This stuff is reading from the keyboard and storing it into a variable, so CIN and then they uses the other arrows that are going into the variable. So CIN will convert the data to the type that matches the variable. Python, you had to ask them for the input, and then you had to use int parentheses or float parentheses in order to convert the data to the correct type. Not in C++. The CIN arrow will convert it to a int if that's what we want. Or if we change the data type to a float, it'll still work. However, if you type in invalid data, the program's going to go nuts. And what do I mean by that? This says how tall is the room, and it's trying to store that into an int. If they type in 3.4, well, that 0.4 is not part of an int, right? It couldn't be stored in an int. It'd blow up. Or even worse, they type in a word, right, rather than a number. And when I say blow up, it's not going to crash the program. Instead, it's going to do something really stupid. So we'll see that at some point during our debugging. But CIN will convert the data into the type that matches the variable if possible. Since this is declared as an int, it's trying to convert whatever's typed in into an int, a whole number. If the user chooses to enter something that cannot be converted into an int, then the program stops working. And you can try to fix that, but it's not as easy as it should be. Displaying a prompt. A prompt is a message that instructs the user to enter data. You should always use cout to display the prompt, because otherwise the user doesn't know what to do, right? If you ran the program and it was just a cursor, a blinking cursor without any idea what you were supposed to do, that's lame, right? The user has no idea what to do. So you have to so-called prompt them. Tell them what they need to do. How tall is the room? That's the prompt, and then you have the input statement. CIN can be used to input more than one value. This is almost worth making you enter, but I'm not gonna. Just take it on faith. I'm going to make this work, and I'm going to demonstrate that. Okay, so here, up at the top of the code, I'm going to make it prompt for something, cout arrow enter x and y, colon, and hit enter, and hit return, something like that. Now I need two variables, int x comma y, and I'm going to let them type in both of them, CIN arrow x arrow y, and then once that is done, it's going to go and do stuff with those values. System pause. Okay, so I'm going to pretend that this is the only code that I have, right, from there to there, kind of like I copy and pasted my boilerplate. So there we go. That's our code. Here I'm asking for two pieces of data at the same time. I don't tend to do this because when the program runs, it's not clear what they're supposed to be doing. Hit X and Y and hit return. Well, that's pretty clear. But what if they type in 100 and then hit enter? And it just sits there. And the user doesn't know what they're supposed to do next. And they start getting frustrated. They hit enter a bunch. Finally, they may get the idea and enter a value for Y. Right? That's called tokenizing the input. The CIN thing, the CIN object, will so-called tokenize it, which means ignore all the white spaces and all the tabs and stuff. And that's why it was letting me hit enter over and over and over until I finally typed in a good piece of data. So the 100 went into the first variable, the 70 went into the second variable, and all this intervening stuff in the middle was just ignored. Now what I was hoping the user would do is this, enter X and Y and hit return, right? 100, 200, like that. But again, the prompt is ambiguous, right? Because it has that word and in it. Maybe I think I'm supposed to type in 100 and 200, right? No, that would crash. It doesn't, I mean, it would not work. If I printed out X and Y down below, we would not see the input that we want to see. Let's prove that. Cout arrow quote x equals end quote arrow x arrow ENDL, and I'm going to do the same thing for y. And I'm going to type in that exact input that I just showed y'all. Enter x and y. Okay, 1 and 2. Alrighty, y did not equal 2. We gave it bad input. It tried to convert the word and into a variable, into an and, but it didn't know what it was, right? And isn't a number, so it just gave us a value of 0. And things are probably going to be even worse further down the line. This is about the last thing we're going to lecture about. Let's go look. So multiple values from the keyboard have to be separated by spaces. When I ran it, enter x and y, I couldn't do this, 100, 200, right? That's kind of dumb. How would it know which is which? I had to type in 100 space 200, or I was allowed to separate them with the tab key, 100, 200, or I was allowed to hit enter, or I could get wild and crazy and mix those. Right, that's stupid. But anyways, you get the idea. All the white space, and white space includes hitting enter and tabbing, and the space bar is ignored past the first one, which is used to separate the pieces of data. And so here's this piece. There. There's some white space. It will skip that to get to the next piece of data. And so x is equal to 100 or y is equal to 200. Now that I've said all that, I almost never do that. I like telling the user exactly what to do. Right? What is the value of x? What is the value of y? Rather than trying to do two pieces of input at the same time, because that confuses the user.
So what if you said what is your full name?
That's when, good question. But you don't, yeah, like this. String fn for full name. Cout, enter your full name. If we just do this, cin arrow arrow fn, and then we write it back out, name equals, you know, arrow arrow fn arrow arrow ndl, it's not going to work. And the people who did that thing where you're trying to enter the name of a college, it did not work appropriately. All right, apparently I've already redefined fn. Let me make this look different. Full in. All right, so if I type in Joe Roberts as my name, things have already gone totally wrong, because it said hit enter x and y and hit return, but instead of typing in x and y, I typed in Joe Roberts. So that was a failure on my part. Let's do it again. Enter x and y and hit return. Okay, 1 and 2, hit enter. Enter your full name, Joe Bob. And it says my name is Joe, just like if you're trying to enter your college name. You could do this, but this doesn't work really. I'm going to make another variable called last name. So instead of doing full name, I'm going to do string first in, comma, last in. And then so the first time I read a piece of data in, I'm going to store it into first name. And then I'm going to use another one like that to read into last in. This is a valid effort. And so my name is equal to first in, followed by a space, followed by last in. This will work some of the time. I should have said first or last name though, because if I type in Joe Bob, it's going to work. But if I type in George Herbert Walker Bush, oh, that's the X and Y. Thank you for saving me. Alrighty, 1 and 2, and then Bob Quincy Jones, right? And it said my name was Bob and Quincy because each one only got stored in a single string. So how do you fix it? You have to use something called getLine, which is mentioned in, let's see if it's mentioned later in this PowerPoint. That'd be nice, so I won't have to look it up. Yeah, okay. So working with characters and string objects. If you're trying to use CIN to enter more than one thing, it's not going to work. So you have to use getLine if you want to read an entire string and store it into one variable. And they give us an example here. Please enter your name. Get line, parentheses, CIN name. Please enter the city you're in. Get line, CIN. So
Can you say what get line was again?
get line, let me type in the example. Get line lets you type in more than one piece of data separated by spaces. Because when I said enter name, if I wanted to enter two names, Joe Bob, then it would only accept Joe. So I'm going to make some changes here, and this is going to say string full name again. Please enter your full name, and I'm going to do get line from CIN into full name, and then I'm going to print that out. Cout, quote, your name is, end quote, arrow, arrow, full name, arrow, arrow, ENDO. So you use get line when the user needs to enter more than one piece of data on the same line and have it all stored into one string.
You're missing your center.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. And it didn't work. Once you start mixing get line and these other things, it kind of messes up, and there's a way that you can fix it, but I'm going to totally cheat and just delete this stuff. And now it will work. But it was lame I did it that way. That was a cheap hack. Jeff Thompson. Your name is Jeff Thompson. The problem comes when you start mixing greater than, and get line. And I know there's a way to fix it, but I'm not going to find it in the next 2 minutes. So let's leave that as an open topic for now. Just tuck it away in your brain. If you want to read in Rose State College as the name of your college, you already use get line, but there's some other trick we need to use in order to get it to accept that. All right, we don't have to upload anything into the Dropbox, but I'm going to make the Dropbox, but I'm going to say nothing to upload. If you did take notes and you want to stick something in it, that's cool, but you don't have to.